The 9 o'clock deadline has come and gone. Cuts are still rolling in. Jets haven't put out their official full roster yet, but we have some cuts. We have some ideas as to what this team is going to look like. I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. So if you have, we'll start off here. If you didn't see it, the Jets made a trade today. Not a huge deal, but a trade nonetheless. They sent promising cornerback, who I think, won over a lot of fans with the way he played on special teams, and he did do a nice job on defense too, Brandon Codrington. So he was the undrafted free agent, one of many who they brought in, and one of many who looked good in the secondary. A few guys were let go today, and some good players. For a change, the Jets are able to trade guys rather than just dump everyone. But anyway, Codrington gets shipped off to the Buffalo Bills in a swap of 6th-round picks. So not much coming back in terms of compensation. I've seen some people complaining, why did we trade this guy? He looked promising. Why trade him to the Bills within the division? So here's my thought. The Jets have depth at corner now. Enough depth that they weren't going to keep Codrington, who would not see the field as a corner and only play specials. You're only going to keep so many of those guys, and we've talked about this at length. I expect that to be Isaiah Davis or Irv Charles or both. Those guys will make the roster, I believe. Charles is maybe a little bit on the bubble if they're not putting as much emphasis on a gunner. We'll see what happens there. But with Codrington, you've got a guy who's only going to be a return man, wouldn't see any reps on defense, so there's no room for him. You could let him go and get nothing for him, or you can deal him. Now, if they sent him to the Bills, I seriously doubt the Bills were the first team and only team the Jets called. I'm sure they called around to everyone who they thought might be interested, and the Bills must have been the only team that were willing to give up anything. And they gave up close to nothing. This could end up being literally 3 or 4 draft slots. So it's about as close to nothing as you can get, but it isn't entirely nothing. You've gotten something for Codrington, who you were going to let go. And listen, when you make these calls, if the Bills are the team being most aggressive in acquiring him, then there's a good chance when you let him go, they're going to be the team that's most aggressive in signing him. So there's a good chance he lands in Buffalo anyway. So if you're Joe Douglas, you say, you know what, let's just ship this kid to the Bills. Probably going to land in Buffalo as it is if we let him go. And you swap picks. So, not a huge deal, but nice to see that the Jets have some players who are drawing interest from other teams. Now, and, I messaged Dylan Turman and Chris Schubert about this earlier. I'd kind of forgotten until sort of 7, 8 o'clock, local time, UK time. I feel like the Jets did this last year. I feel like it wasn't until after 9 p.m. that they released their 53 through their own, through the Jets website, the Jets Twitter account, and not every player who was cut was leaked or reported. But a few guys who weren't cut, this is really the bigger story than the trade. But we kicked off with a trade because it was more recent by a few minutes. Connor Hughes reporting that 3, now, and we've talked on this show at length about Leonard Taylor, about Braden McGregor, about Eric Watts. I've said, can Watts be that JFM replacement? He's closer in size to him than some of the other guys are, can play a little bit inside, can play a little bit outside. Talked about how I like the way he uses length. He's able to get his hands up and occupy passing lanes and make, get some batted balls to the line. Talked about McGregor, of course, guy played for a national championship team, looked good down in Mobile. And Leonard Taylor, who was, in my mind, I think in most people's minds, anyone who's following the draft, following college football, Leonard Taylor was the biggest free agent signing just in terms of name recognition and a guy who a lot of people felt was going to be a high draft pick going into this last year. Didn't have his best season, so I think some people cooled on him and thought, all right, well, maybe he'll be, a mid-rounder. Goes undrafted, goes to the Jets. All 3 stick. So that's 2 edge guys in Watts and McGregor. They stick. Taylor sticks. And then, according to Zach Rosenblatt, Tack McKinley sticks. Another edge. That's 3 edges. And listen, it's important to remember the 53 breaking down the day of, it's all fun and all that, but it's not uncommon to see 3 or 4 guys get swapped out in the couple days that follow. Maybe even the following day, because you're going to comb through guys who get released. And if you see somebody you like, you make a move. And also, Hassan Reddick isn't in town yet, or at least he's not at work. Once Hassan Reddick shows up, somebody's got to go. Now, is it going to be one of the young guys, or if he's not been let go already? Again, we don't know. All the cuts aren't out. But Michael Clemens, we've talked about him in recent days as a guy who perhaps his time with the Jets is coming to a close. He does some good things. I've talked about that. I'm not it's not that I don't like Clemens. I do. But the fact that the number of times we see him, the big thing is, and I've mentioned it before, go back and look at the Washington game, the touchdown to allow to Daniels on the run with the keeper where Michael Clemens bites and crashes down inside. And we saw that from him several times this preseason. And I said the other day, I said, how many times can you do that before the coaching staff says, you know what, maybe it's time to move on from this guy? So I'm not saying they are. I'm not saying we know what they're doing there. But you just kept 3 edge guys who a lot of people were thinking one of these guys sticks, maybe 2. You kept 3. That makes it awfully difficult for Michael Clemens, just from a sheer numbers game. Let's see here. Yeah, still nothing. We've got basically Trey Swilling was let go, the corner who they picked up during camp, son of Pat Swilling, who's really, I thought he had a good camp. He had a really good camp for himself. I saw one tweet that said Cole Laval didn't make the roster, and again, numbers game. I don't know that he played well enough to deserve a roster spot, but a lot of guys did. So good news for the Jets as a whole. Did see one tweet saying he was let go, but it wasn't. It was somebody that I was like, wasn't a source I was familiar with. Not sure how reputable. And listen, this is a great day. The best thing about this day is for the fake source people, because we all know there are people on Twitter who pretend they have sources and they don't, but they want to get credibility. And if they say they have a source, people will believe them. Now, if you say you have a source and you're right, you might pick up a lot of followers. Oh, here's an insider. Here's somebody. Well, guess what? It's cut down day. I could easily name 15 guys I know this team is going to cut and just claim to have a source, but I'm not going to do that. And I'm just really leery of other people that do it when they say, this guy's cut, per source, and it's somebody who nobody knows who they are. And like I said, there is no day on the NFL calendar where it's easier to guess and get like 10, 12, 15 things right and, just claim to have a source. I'm not going to play that game. The couple places where I saw the tweets about Laval not making it. And again, I would love for him to make it. I've said it before. I just I don't know that the numbers are there working in his favor. We've not seen, let me see. And I've said this the other day too, always a good idea to go to the forums at JetNation.com, because really the number of, it's basically like you've got 10,000 Jet fan friends who are, scouring the internet for any news on the Jets, and it will get popped in there on the forums in a hurry. So let's see. Justin Hardy apparently released by the Browns. Just saw that. That's a little bit surprising given what a good player he is. You figured he would have stuck there. Obviously did not. And again, I think that's where Irv Charles comes in for the Jets. I think I've said before, I think once Hardy was cut, Charles was the guy that was gonna come in and fill that role. So let's see here. I'm just taking a look. Yeah, so the names that we talked about some of these, or I've tweeted about some of these. The undrafted safety Al Blades was let go, as was Xavier Valade. Valade's a guy you wonder if he lands on the roster on the practice squad, but if the Jets do keep Izzy Abanikanda, you've got 4 backs on the active roster. Do you really need a guy on the practice squad? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But Valade, I wouldn't be shocked if he's back, but I would say it's not as likely as it was last year. Jalen Twyman, who was only with the team for a short period, the defensive lineman out of Pitt, he was let go, as was Trey Swilling, who I mentioned. Brandon Smith, the receiver, the Iowa kid who came from the UFL, made a few really, impressive grabs in very limited opportunities. I would expect him to be a guy they would like to get back on the practice squad. Jalen Key, Mr. Irrelevant, pick number 257, was let go. The only draft pick so far that we've seen let go by Joe Douglas. And Key is a guy, look, I didn't love the pick. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. It's Mr. Irrelevant. It's you're basically borderline UDFA. But there were some other guys. I felt at that time, I thought that pick should have been a lineman, a receiver, or a quarterback, another developmental quarterback. I know they'd already taken Jordan Travis, but somebody like Jason Bean, who I loved out of Kansas, talked about him quite a lot. I believe he went undrafted and signed with the Colts. So there were I felt there were better options than Key. And listen, he may come back, he may be fine, but as of right now, he is the only draft pick that the Jets have parted ways with. That's the most updated list I can find. Like I said, the Colaval thing is yeah, not seeing that anywhere. Not seeing that anywhere legitimate yet. Although as I said, I think he will go. But a lot of fans, surprisingly, were upset by the Codrington deal. And I understand where they're coming from in terms of the fact that he showed something and oh my God, he went to a division rival. But as I said, if you're the Jets and you're calling around and the only team showing interest in giving up something for him is within your division, there's a really good chance when you let him go, that team is going to be the most aggressive team to try to sign him because the Bills do need help. And now they've got it in terms of a return man. Interesting segment this morning wanted to discuss. I caught it. I don't, as I've said, I'm in the UK. I don't get ESPN, but I don't even really enjoy it that much anymore. But I did see a clip this morning on YouTube, the conversation about the Aaron Rodgers record when the Jets give up 20 points or less. I was on Jake Assman yesterday, talked to him about it, and I'd seen Jake reference it earlier in the day. And I knew the number was really impressive because someone brought it up months ago. But it sort of refreshed, it was brought back yesterday when Jake Assman talked about it. And then today, Damien Woody talked about it on ESPN First Take or whatever. I think that's what it's called. Aaron Rodgers in his career, 81-10 when his defense gives up 20 points or less. 81-10, which is just insane. And in a shorter time frame, I think it was over the last 5-6 years, whatever it was, 35-2. 35-2 when his team gives up 20 or less. And this might be, I mean, look, I'm not going to say that I've followed the Green Bay Packers closely throughout the course of Aaron Rodgers' career, but I would be willing to bet this is the best defense Aaron Rodgers has ever played with. And this is a thing where not only might the Jets be in position where they're going to win some more games, win more games than we've become accustomed to, but when you talk about things that will keep a guy motivated to hang around for a little while, this defense plays well enough and this team does something special, you might have Aaron Rodgers hanging around a little bit longer. A.J. Dillon, by the way, non-Jets related, but this one just popped up. A.J. Dillon placed on IR with a neck injury, and it's not short-term. So it's, 2024 season is over. That, according to, well, I don't know who had it first, but that's a U Stadium tweet. So Dillon's season is over. Christian Barmore with the Patriots goes on reserve NFI list. This all according to Ian Rappaport. Bengals put Miles Murphy on IR, but designate him to return. And the Vikings have waived Lewis Seen. That's a guy, a lot of people thought quite highly of him in the draft. Second-round pick just a year or two ago, and he's gone already. So that's a bit of a surprising move. And I don't know about you guys, going through the cuts as they're coming in, if there's any names that jump out at you as possible targets for the Jets. Matt Hennessy, Thomas Hennessy's brother, who was a highly thought of guard at, what was it, Rutgers or Indiana, forget where. He's been let go by the Eagles. That's one name that jumps out at me. There was Bailey Zappi. Look, Bailey Zappi's not great, but he's done enough in the league that I look at him and say, if you put him on your practice squad, is he a guy that you could live with as someone, if a quarterback goes down and you need to bring him up and be your new backup or to start a few games, feel pretty comfortable with that. I'm more so than with the guys they have. So it's a matter of, where do the Jets see an opportunity to upgrade, and do they take it? We've got, let's see, a few things in here. Like I said, just trying to stay on top of all of these, and nothing new on here. Colaval. Now, this is on the board at JetNation.com, claiming that the Jet press is saying Laval has been let go. But again, it's been reported by 5 or 6 folks. And again, it wouldn't be surprising. It would just be Eddie. And I tweeted out yesterday that putting together when I'm doing my 53, I think the hardest thing for me, and I can't imagine internally what the Jets are going through. To me, Laval was one of the hardest guys to cut because he just played so well this preseason. But my gut feeling said they're going to want to go with a guy like Wes Schweitzer. Xavier Newman also played really well. He probably makes the roster. He's got a little bit of versatility too. Plays guard and center. I think he played both guard spots this preseason. So basically, folks, what this all boils down to is that it would appear the New York Jets have some really good football players. Enough good football players that guys they release are going to get picked up by other teams. Again, we just saw the Bills trade for Codrington. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 1 or 2 more minor deals where teams like something the Jets have and say, you know what, we'd rather get that guy for a 7 than have to compete with other teams in free agency, or possibly. And again, not that it's going to be a bidding war, but if a guy just chooses another team over you for whatever reason, you think, we really would have liked to have him, and you missed an opportunity by not giving up a late day 3 pick, which again, they could be nothing, but those are trade chips. Those are things that a GM can. Let's see. Jets are key. Well, yeah, this is again. I think they might keep 11 D linemen, but Clemens again, he's kind of the X factor. Jalen Holmes, another one. I listed one guy on each side of the ball. I thought Laval and Jalen Holmes on defense were 2 of the hardest guys for me to cut. I'm not sure Jalen Holmes sticks now because you get Watts. I kind of felt like those were the 2 guys competing for the same spot because of their size, versatility. But it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing with this. And it's surprising. I really I thought the Jets would have had it, would have had their roster out by sort of 9:30. It's now 9:37. Again, local England time. It's now 9:37. Let's see. According to Rich Cimini of ESPN, I knew it was at New York Daily News. God. ESPN New York, Rich Cimini. How unusual is the Jets-Bills trade? Until today, the Codrington deal. It hadn't happened since 1987 when the Bills sent Don Smith to the Jets for a 1988 conditional pick. The teams actually made 7 trades in the 60s and 70s. 87, can't say I remember that one. I was 11 years old. That was the year I started watching the NFL and probably didn't even understand what a trade was or a draft pick at that point. Year 1 for me. And no other breaking news here. Again, a little bit surprising. Expected. Let's see. Yeah, Vikings. Also, Cine was a first rounder. Going off memory, I thought he was a second round pick. So the Vikings waive Lewis Cine, the Georgia kid. Surprising move. And I think I mentioned the Codrington pick was for a swap of late. I think I said 6th round. Actually, 2026 picks. Not necessarily 6th round. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. I'm actually gonna. I think I retweeted it earlier. I'm gonna retweet it again now. Again at JN Radio _Glenn, or repost it because it's not Twitter anymore. Dennis Waszak with a really good article. Dennis Waszak of the Associated Press, with a really good article breaking down each category you'll see players in over the next day or so with IR, PUP, NFI, non-football injury, practice squad, what the rules are, what qualifies guys for each spot, and nice and informative little piece. One practice squad rule that came down the other day didn't get a ton of press, but I saw it on the forums at JetNation.com. The emergency quarterback being able to bring a guy up and down unlimited times has been done away with. It is limited now to 3 times that you can bring a quarterback from your practice squad up to your active roster, which could, that could be an important development if, some teams would plan on just keep a practice squad guy without having to burn a roster spot and pull them up when they need them. Let's see. Okay, that's, yep. Yeah, so nothing Nothing official yet from the Jets. Like I said, kind of surprising. Okay, this is not the Jets, but this is another surprising one because I thought he had a shot to stick for sure. Michael Pratt is out in Green Bay, where the Packers today or yesterday, I forget, lose track of time. I think it was earlier today, traded for Malik Willis, the former Titans and Liberty quarterback. Let's see. Alon says, love that the Jets decided to keep untapped talent at DL. I love it too. These, if even if one of these guys pans out to be a, mid high level performer at that price tag, what you get a UDFA for, you got to have those guys. You got to have those guys on your roster. We see it all the time. Top teams have those late round picks, those UDFAs who aren't killing you against the cap, but who are, playing at a high level. And if any of those guys can become regular contributors, I think with Taylor, the biggest thing is going to be against the run. A lot of times he got completely washed out when he was double teamed in the preseason. That's something obviously he can work on, try to, get his anchor, improve his anchor. But I think, the reason he stuck is because his ability against the pass and his ability to bring pressure. And don't get me wrong, he had some splash plays against the run. He had some some TFLs getting into the backfield, wreaking havoc. I'm not knocking the guy. I saw a handful of plays where when the run play was designed to go through his gap, he's just completely washed out. Let's see. Charles, how we doing? Charles says, good afternoon. Do you know the terms of the trade? Just that it's a 2026 late round pick. So it might be 7 for a 6, something like that. I'll actually have to edit that on the JetNation. The story I did, I put 6th rounders. It was 2026 picks. Let's see. And that right now, Tim Patrick, that was another name that came up earlier. Let go by the Denver Broncos. This is a receiver who's missed some time with injury, but he's a big dude, 6'4". He's been really productive. And the Jets, again, I like the receiver room, but it's not as if they have a bunch of established guys who they know they can count on. But the thing with Patrick would be the injury concerns. So I'm not so sure that I would worry too much about that, or I wouldn't be too quick to bring him in. But I did see his name mentioned by some Jets fans earlier today, saying, "Why don't we go get this guy?" But I don't know if that'll happen. Another name that popped up again, having said how stacked this interior offensive line is, Doug Nestor was let go earlier today. I just mentioned him because I thought he was going to be, I thought he was going to get drafted higher than he actually was. Sorry about that. Dog's on the other side of the door going nuts for some reason. But yeah, Nestor is a guy who's out there now as a free agent. And I don't know if he's going to get picked up. But if I'm the Jets, I'm considering him. Again, if he's a guy you can sneak onto your practice squad. And this is what's going to be interesting because, as we've said, it's not as if it's breaking news that this Jets team has a ton of talent. But as guys that get let go, we saw a bunch of free agents get grabbed last year from opposing teams. The Jets have to be looking at these guys, and I'm sure this is why they kept the 3 undrafted free agents, because the Jets are looking at McGregor and Taylor and Watts, and they're probably saying we might like to put one of these guys on the practice squad, but they're not making it through waivers. They all played well enough that somebody would grab them. Everybody wants guys up front who can pressure the quarterback, sack the quarterback, and that's what all 3 of these guys show they can do. McKinley, I said it after the Week 1 game against Washington. And we'd seen the tweets. Nick Faria was a guy who was singing McKinley's praises early on, and once we got to see it live, or once we got to see them in action, I said after that game that he looked so quick off the ball. He looked like a guy who would be drafted in the first round. It's exactly what he is. So seeing him come off the edge and with the explosiveness that he did, and I know people saying, "Oh, he's doing it against second string." Look, an explosive first step is an explosive first step. I don't care if you're doing it against Trent Williams or if you're doing it against a trash can. Like, your physical ability is what it is. It's not as if you're going to show that first step that McKinley showed, and then all of a sudden you're going to slow down when you're faced with better competition. Now, it's going to be harder to beat those guys, but you're still doing what you're doing. And what McKinley did all through camp and all through the preseason, especially in that final game, he terrorized offensive linemen. And again, this is a former first-round pick who had, I believe, 7 sacks as a rookie, 5 one year, 7 his second year, or those might be flipped, whatever it was. But he had 12 sacks in his first couple years, showed some promise, looked like he might be the guy that the Falcons hoped they were getting when they took him in the first. And then things didn't go well. With injury, scheme, whatever the reason, was out of the game for a year and a half, and looks to have bounced back. And now Takk McKinley, a guy who was a very under the radar signing, all of a sudden makes the roster on one of the best defenses in the NFL for a coaching staff that, again, no matter what you think of Robert Saleh and this staff, I've been critical of Saleh when I felt it was appropriate, but I don't think anybody can, and I don't think anybody can, with a straight face, question the staff's ability to identify and develop talented defensive players. And so this should be a really encouraging thing for Jets fans to see that 3 of these UDFAs made it. Takk McKinley, trying to make a comeback as a former first-round pick, makes it. Charles, again, in the chat, didn't understand why he traded with the Bills. Jets are looking good in the later rounds, hoping to get a star after the cuts. McKinley looks like the starter until we sign Reddick. Yeah, until Reddick shows up, McKinley might be the guy. But, Charles, you may have missed it. I said at the top, I think the reason you trade with the Bills is because, A, Codrington's an asset. Like, you feel like you can get something for him. If you call around and the Bills are the only team offering you something, you could say, no, we're not dealing with the Bills, and then release him. Well, if the Bills were the most aggressive team in trade negotiations, who do you think is going to be the most aggressive team when the guy's a free agent? So he's likely going to land with the Bills anyway. So you may as well get yourself an upgraded pick and something in exchange for the kid, rather than just cut him loose and get absolutely nothing in return. Let's see any. Okay, so that's the Niners have released theirs, or a few of the 49ers picks. Robbie Anderson, Robbie chosen, let go by the 49ers. And anybody else of note? Rocky Sin, who I remember him coming out, him being a guy that a lot of people were talking up. He is let go by San Francisco, another veteran released, and still nothing from Gangrene, but it's good. It's going to be extremely interesting to see how this D line pans out, because, again, one second. Once again, they're going to have almost an embarrassment of riches at edge, and they're going to have to make some calls there that we will see. I saw Antoine Staley posted earlier because somebody mentioned the possibility of Michael Clemens going, and Antoine Staley just said, he's not going anywhere. And I know a lot of people feel that way. And I said the other day, I think I might let him go if I were calling the shots, but my gut says the Jets are going to keep him. After seeing who they've kept so far, I'm not as confident in that, because that's a lot of D linemen. That's a lot of guys on the edge. And, we talked about it the other day, how the Jets asked Michael Clemens to put on weight so he could move inside, and then they end up moving him back outside this year and acknowledged that was a screw up on their part. So Clemens not going to be the versatile piece that they had sort of envisioned last year. And let's see, where can I see the players we released or kept? Jets haven't put it out yet, Charles. If you do go, as I said, actually, let me put in the chat here for you guys. I'll grab the actual thread, because as the news is coming in, people are, let's see real quick. Jets to cut to 53, official thread. There we go. So in here, every cut that comes in, people are posting them in there. That should go in. There you go. Pop into that thread, and you'll find the list. And folks are updating them as they come in. They're just adding to the list. That's where the names I read off a few minutes ago, that's where they came from. I'm going to go ahead and check, go to the most recent page, see if anything else is breaking. It's, again, the Michael Pratt thing is surprising. No. Okay. So no, and as I said, I'm pretty sure the Jets did this last year. They kept us waiting until the last minute, and then Well, actually, beyond the last minute. And then all of a sudden, they just tweeted out the roster. And that way, rather than go through and try to pick through the 37 names of guys that were released or who were waived, they just said, here it is. But again, as I said at the top, important to remember, we see it every team every year. Here's our 53, and then the next day, 2, 3, 4 of those guys get released, and you scoop up guys that were let go by other teams. So even though the guys who are here right now today, they may not be here in 24, 48 hours. The defensive linemen who were kept. Well, Charles, all we know right now is that, and this is according to Connor Hughes of SNY, they've decided to keep Eric Watts, they've decided to keep Leonard Taylor, and they've decided to keep Braden McGregor, while Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic says they are keeping Tack McKinley. So those 4 guys are staying, right? I don't have the roster in front of me. I don't want to leave any names out. But what do you have? You have Quinnen, you have Kinlaw, you have Fotu, you have Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, the 4 guys I just mentioned. That's 9. Did I say Fotu, Lucky Fotu? And Clemens, that would be 11. So are they going to keep 11? That'd be a big number. We know they love to keep their linemen fresh. But I mean, listen, if McGregor and Watts are even above average at this point, they're going to have talk about being able to get after the quarterback in waves. They can already do that, really, with subbing guys in and out because you've got JJ, because you've got Quinnen. I think, and I talked about this yesterday. I've said it a few times. I think Kinlaw and McKinley, like, these are both reclamation projects. I know Kinlaw wasn't out of the league, but he's not lived up to the hype so far. In San Francisco, hasn't been the guy they thought he would be when they drafted him. Comes to the Jets and goes out and puts on whatever he said, 25, 35 pounds of muscle, which every time I say that out loud, I feel like I have to say that sounds impossible. That's what Kinlaw says he's done. He does look enormous. I mean, regardless, no matter how much, whether he's put on 15, 25, 30, whatever. We all saw him at the presser. He looks huge. He's going to play alongside Quinnen Williams. Then you're going to have JJ and McDonald on the edges. And now behind that, again, Clemens, we'll see if he sticks. You're going to have Watts and McGregor. They're going to have a lot of guys to cycle through, which is their thing, right? Keep bodies fresh, keep linemen fresh. And that's why if they did carry 11, it wouldn't be all that shocking. But then you start looking at places like running back and Izzy Abanikanda, as we've talked about in the past. Is there room for Izzy on the roster? There are scenarios. There are some, people projecting the 53 where there's room for Izzy. I don't know if there's room for Izzy when you keep 11 D linemen, if that is in fact the plan, because that's a big number. And how many O linemen do you keep? I would think 10, but we'll see what happens there. They've got, again, it's nice for a change to, in years past, we've had to sit down and look at this roster and try to figure out who they have, who's worthy of, you're keeping guys that you're questioning whether or not they even belong in the NFL. Now, not only guys who belong, but guys that other teams are going to scoop up if they're let go. But it's an interesting little game of musical chairs. Let's see. Yeah, Ed the Red says, why are we airing? I'm assuming you've been waiting so long to release the 53. The waiting is killing me. I'm right there with you, Ed. And I said it, I've mentioned it a couple times already, that at sort of an hour before the deadline, I flashed back to last year and actually messaged our friends, Chris and Dylan, and said, I think the Jets last year waited until the last minute. And then really it was like, I think they waited until after the last minute, which they have, because it is 55 minutes past the deadline for teams to make their cuts. So I would imagine the Jets social media team is putting together the roster in the slideshow format that they so often use. And any moment now, that is going to pop up on our collective, respective Twitter feeds. And yeah, see, this is the thing. They did it and I just saw a tweet from somebody, and this is the case because, again, we saw it last year. The 5 o'clock deadline is the deadline to get your roster into the league, so the league knows who your guys are. You can get it out to the fans whenever you get it out to the fans. There's not There's no deadline on that. So again, I would imagine the league has the roster, and the Jets are putting together their because even within the building, I would imagine that almost like the draft, right? Stays inside the draft room, the whatever room. You're not putting it out there for interns and folks like that to get an eye on it and maybe fire off a few tweets or that's how information leaks. So the Jets have played it close to the vest. Braden says, any news yet, Glenn? Not in terms of the full 53, Braden. I don't know if you just joined us. The big stories were Codrington traded to the Bills for a 2026 pick. And we know through Connor Hughes and Zach Rosenblatt that McGregor, Watts, Taylor, and McKinley all make the roster. 4D linemen. That's still just crazy to me. Charles hops in again. Always appreciate you jumping in here, Charles. You like Clemens? Agree the Jets D line is deep, very deep. Could you package Clemens with a sixth in exchange for a fifth? I mean, it's possible. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I think Clemens is. I think he's been in the league long enough now that teams kind of know what he is, and he's not a special player. Not that not that you're talking about massive compensation here. I just don't know what his trade value is. I think if the Jets can deal him, they will. Which is going to be the case with anybody you're getting rid of. Make some phone calls first. Not confirmed through the team yet, Braden, but Connor Hughes reporting and stuff like that. Connor usually pretty spot on. So it was Connor Hughes that reported McGregor, Taylor, and Watts, and it was Zach Rosenblatt who reported McKinley. So, but no, nothing official from the team. Let's see. And Charles also chips in with Stiggers will be a star in this league. He really will. I mean, listen, we all know DJ Reed's a really nice player. He's a fan favorite. He's got 1 year left on his deal. And with what Stiggers has shown early on, with what we've seen from JBC, and some of these young kids, who knows if any of them will make the roster, we'll see. I think it's fair to say this is DJ Reed's final year as a Jet. It's not. He's a $10 million a year guy right now. That'll bump up next year. This team needs to get creative and find some cap space somewhere because they're going to need it. And Dylan, feel free to hop in if you're home. I don't know if you're at work or what the situation is. Salah always finds a way to keep 11. Look, he loves it. I think Salah would keep 15 if Joe Douglas let him. But keep churning out top defenses, and I don't care. Keep 17 D linemen if it keeps your defense in the top 5 or 10. Braden says, I think probably mean, Tack. Thought Tack might get cut, but brought back again because of his veteran status, not needing to pass waivers. Yeah, I think that when you look at the way he's played, even not having to get through waivers, if you let him go with a plan of bringing him back, while he's gone, other teams can call and say, hey, man, we'll give you this, how much are the Jets paying you? Because he's not a big money guy right now, so whatever the Jets are giving him, it wouldn't take a whole lot to top that. So you might lose him. You run that risk. Again, edge rushers, man. People need them. People want them. And the Jets have one right now. The Jets have one kind of, but don't. Right? Hassan Reddick still not in camp. Sent out another workout video today. I'm not sure what the goal is of the workout videos. Is it just to keep fans reassured that, hey, don't worry, our guy's staying in shape? Or is it saying, hey, New York Jets, look what you're missing? Or is it saying, hey, other teams, this is how our guy looks if you want to call the Jets and try to make a trade? I don't know what their goal is. I mean, I know there are a few different possibilities, but I think the Jets made it pretty clear they're not going to deal him. But listen, it's going to start getting really interesting with Reddick pretty soon because, as I said, he's about to start hitting. I think it averages out to about 800, somewhere between 850 and 900,000 per game that he will be fined if he misses games. So look at it this way: if Hassan Reddick holds out, right? We've talked about worst case scenario. If Hassan Reddick holds out up until week 11, because he's got to be on the roster for 6 weeks to get an accrued season. So the longest he could hold out is 11 weeks. that will have cost him his salary this year because his fines right now are just under 5 million. And then you're looking at roughly 900, 880, 900,000 per game for 11 games. That's almost 10 million. So that brings you right around 15 million, which is what he's due this year. So he would be playing this year for free. And then when he signs with another team, no one's helping him get that money back. Look, if he'd been hit with a million or two in fines, he might be able to recoup that. And people will say, "Oh, well, what if he signs somewhere for 25 million?" Whatever he signs for is what he was going to sign for, whether he got his money this year or not. It's not as if teams are going to look at him and say, "Well, he's a $17 million a year guy, but we'll give him 26, 25 because of the money he lost." No, he's going to get on the open market what he was going to get on the open market regardless. So this is money. When you're talking a couple million, there might be ways to make it back. If he decides to hold out for the maximum time, I mean, he's not sitting out the year because then the Jets still have his rights. He's not doing that. But if he sits out until week 11, he will have forfeited $15 million. Where does he get that back? Oh, but Glenn, then he signed for $25 million. Right. He would have signed for that anyway. Whatever he signs for is what he was going to sign for. There's no extra $15 million in there. Oh, but it's a pay raise. Right. He's going to get that. We already know he's going to get a pay raise. Dylan and I had a talk online earlier, and chime in the chat if you disagree. I made the point the other day. I'm not 100% convinced that Hassan Reddick sitting out a bunch of games or coming in and having some mystery injuries, I don't think it hurts his value. I think when teams understand, when GMs understand, again, I'm not saying they like it, but if I'm a general manager and I am in dire need of a pass rusher and Hassan Reddick is a free agent, I know, and he sits out this year or he has mystery injuries and doesn't play. I know what's going on. I know he's still Hassan Reddick. I know he feels as though he's been underpaid for the past 3 or 4 years, and he reached the tipping point where he said, "I can't do this anymore. I need to get paid or I'm not showing up to work." And I'm just going to say, what does this guy look like when he feels he's being paid fair market value? Oh, a top 5, 10 pass rusher in the NFL? How about we do that? How about we pay him like what he is, a top edge rusher, make him happy, and he's going to come in and be what he is. He's not an older guy. Let's see. Dylan says if he sits out all year, he doesn't make more than $16 million next year. Want to get Chris's thoughts tomorrow. This is an interesting case with Reddick, and we will tomorrow night. Me, Dylan, Chris Schubert will be live, and I think this is where mine and Dylan's disagreement is. Dylan feels if he holds out, nobody will pay him. I just don't. If he were 34, 35, 36, I could get on board with that. He's 31. He's going to have, and if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look at the numbers. I don't think he played a ton early in his career because he struggled a little bit early on. I think Arizona had him at like inside linebacker and just didn't work out. So he was in the league for a few years till the miles started really getting, added on. But he's not a guy that I look at and say, "Oh, he's only got 1 or 2 years left." I think you'd be safe to give him a 3-year deal. And if you give him 3 years, 23, 24, 28 million, whatever it is, 28 might be high. I mean, he wants 28, doesn't mean he'll get 28. But he's sure as hell getting a lot more than 15, which is what he's playing for and which is why he's upset. And I can't blame him. On the one hand, I get it. Players should honor contracts. And I know people will say, "Oh, well, teams don't have to honor contracts." They have to honor what they guarantee. They guarantee you X amount of dollars, whether you're cut, traded, released, you get that money. You get what you're guaranteed. Everything else, everyone knows, is all. The team doesn't know they're going to get 100% effort. They take a risk too. So teams take a risk, players take a risk, but what is agreed upon and guaranteed cannot be changed. So Reddick signed a deal several years ago, but now has become an elite premier pass rusher. And as I've said, if you're looking at how good you are at your job and you're making, let's say Reddick numbers, say you're making $15 million a year. Well, you should be happy with $15 million a year. Shouldn't anybody? Well, yeah. Until you look around and there's a metric, there's a way of measuring how good you are at your job compared to your peers. And when you look around at your peers who are in the same echelon as you are, and they're making 27 million a year, like, hang on a minute. I'm making 15 and this guy's making 25, 27, 29. Like, why am I making 15? So I sympathize to some degree with Reddick. Where I don't sympathize with Reddick, we heard him say it publicly. The team says he told them that he would be in camp. And to me, if you're going to lie, then I'm not going to have any sympathy for the fact that you lied. When Reddick was asked, all he had to say, when he was asked when he came in for his introductory press conference, are you going to be here with your contract situation? All he had to say is, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Something like that. But when you stand there and say, I'll what, because that's, that's my character. That's the kind of guy I am. That's just how I am. I will be here. And then you're not there. Okay. But am I going to believe you or the team? When the team says you said you would be there, and I got video of you standing there saying you'll be there. Okay. You weren't honest. So I'm not, that's where you kind of lose me a little bit. But again, I think he's going to lose a ton of money. So yeah, let's see. Dylan says he won't make more than 60. I guess we'll have to wait. Well, I don't think we won't wait and see because he's not going to sit out the year. I think at worst case scenario, he's going to show up and worst case scenario would be if he were to show up and then just claim injuries and say I can't play because this hurts and that hurts. Do you think JD is wanting to let potential free agents know he won't break? Yes and no. I think part of it too, though, is that within his own locker room, like you're going to pay this guy more than all of these other superstars you have who have been here for a little while. I'm not sure. I think what the Jets said was fair, which was come in, perform, and we'll pay you. And Reddick supposedly said okay to that. Again, that was the report, and I believe it because that's what he said in front of the cameras and told everybody that he would report. Been ranting about Reddick so long I haven't checked to refresh here. Let's see. Nothing on there. And into the forums at JetNation. Refresh here. Nothing from the Jets that I can see. Let's see. A lot of people upset about the Covington situation, but it is what it is. All right. Also, we got a couple more comments here in the chat. So yeah, Braden, and like I said, that could be part of it to show that, like, look, when and I think Joe Douglas already has that reputation. I think Joe Douglas in almost all of his negotiations, I think the Aaron Rodgers thing might be the one caveat. And when you're trying to acquire a Hall of Fame quarterback, maybe things change up a little for you. Charles says he likes the way the Jets are putting a good roster together. In case we can't sign Michael Carter, we need to give Reddick a 3-year extension. See, I feel like Reddick 3 years is safe. Michael Carter, you gotta get him retained. Let's see. I believe the Jets will be a winning team for the next 3 years. If they get AR to hang around for 3 years, absolutely. And really, the Jordan Travis thing, we'll see how that works out. But it seems like they're finally trying to take the time to properly develop a quarterback and not rush somebody. Let's see. And back in the chat, just trade the cancer. Aries says, well, you got to look at it like this way, Aries. And I don't disagree. I see where you're coming from. I get the frustration. But if the Jets were the only team willing to trade for this guy when he said he would come in, what are the odds someone trading for him now when they know he didn't mean that he's going to want? How many teams right now have the cap room to bring a new guy in and pay him $28 million or 25, 22, whatever it may be? Not a ton. Michael Carter, running back, released. That's a shame. I mean, he'll catch on somewhere. I think I did see somewhere. I haven't looked at other rosters because I don't care. But I did see someone say the other day that the Cardinals had like 5 backs that could make the roster, and it listed Carter as a possibility. But when I looked at the list, I thought, yeah, he might get let go. But I thought in what little action I did see him in the preseason, the guy looks rejuvenated, looks a little happier. Brandon Smith cut, did see that. I may not have mentioned that earlier. Braden, thanks for bringing that up. What has Ruckert done to be gifted a roster spot? It's a fair question, Bang, but I think the big thing with Ruckert is that the team just hasn't. The offense has been so dysfunctional that it's hard to look at any guy and judge their performance. I talked about Ruckert the other day and said I think that if he'd been drafted by any other team, he would have had a more productive career to this point. He can't get a target. When the Jets in the few opportunities, I encourage you to search Twitter. The highlights will be out there. If you have the all 22, go have a look around at the games when he's lined up at fullback. He is a monster. Jeremy Ruckert should 100% be the fullback on this team because they don't use it a ton, 8, 10, 12 snaps, whatever it may be. Jeremy Ruckert punishes people in the run game as a lead blocker. That should be part of his job, along with being your second tight end. For whatever reason, the Jets haven't incorporated him, despite the fact they've struggled so terribly to move the football. So I think he's going to get a spot because he has value if they, again, sometimes teams will do things in practice in the preseason that they won't do publicly. You won't see it in games. You won't see it in the joint practices. But when there's no eyeballs on them, they'll do some things. I can't help but wonder, like, I really hope they're working Ruckert at fullback without us knowing it. Because go back to the Dolphins game of his rookie year, and then last season, I forget who it was. He unfortunately concussed himself. But he's a monster. Monster as a lead blocker. You use Ruckert as a lead blocker with this offensive line in place that they have. I'll tell you what, man, Breece Hall is going to run for all the yards. But he does. And I wrote an article on this a couple months ago, maybe a month ago, whatever it was. Ruckert, he does have to perform this year. Year 3, he's got to get some opportunities, and he's got to make the most of those opportunities. I think he will. I think he's going to be a really good player if he gets a shot. But we'll see if the Jets do him right, or if they just keep sort of leaving him out there to block as a tight end, occasional rep as a fullback. We'll see what happens there. Let's see. So yeah, they shopped Michael Carter in recent days. Like I said, I think he catches on somewhere. Excuse me. Let's see if there's any interesting names on here. Bears roster moves on cut down day. Waived. Looking for any names that jump out at me. Austin Reed, was he the Western Kentucky quarterback? Released. Brett Rippon, cup of coffee with the Jets last year. Dante Pettis, IR. Nobody that jumps out. Nobody is a guy the Jets should or would be interested in. And let's see, what are we at here? Yeah, 12 minutes, nearly an hour and 15 minutes post cut down deadline. Still nothing from the Jets. So I think, as I was saying earlier about the trading of Reddick, I don't see it as a real possibility, and I think the Jets just view him as an asset. And here's the pie in the sky best case scenario. He shows up to practice in a couple days and goes out and gets a sack in the opener, and everyone forgets all this happened, and he just goes out and plays hard. Robert Saleh did say that. I meant to mention that earlier when we got on the topic of Hassan Reddick. Robert Saleh, when asked earlier, are we at the point yet? Because he was asked this a couple days ago and he wasn't clear. He was asked if there's a chance Reddick wouldn't play in the opener because of how much time he's missed. And he hadn't said, Saleh was like, we're talking about the guys who are here. But then he was asked again today, and he said, it's not too late. Like, there's still enough time. We're confident he's keeping himself in good shape. He knows how to play the game. If he comes in, we would expect him to play week 1. So that's important. But when does that change? At what point does he have to be there to be on the field for the Jets week 1? Let's see, Charles. Yeah, we all want to see more from Ruckert. And he should be at fullback. Wholly agree. I'll tell you what, man. You mentioned that, Charles. Let me see Jeremy Ruckert as a lead blocker for Braylon Allen. I mean, come on now. I mean, again, this line, Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, running stuff outside with Joe Tippmann with his ability to get outside on stretch plays, get the ball outside to get Braylon Allen ahead of steam with Ruckert lead blocking. Sign me up for that all day long, and just annihilate people. That's one thing. You look at, as excited as we are about Aaron Rodgers, and we should be, you look at the structure of this roster, and you can really see this being a team that runs the ball a ton because they have the horses to do it. So why not just let Aaron pick his spots? And Aaron, we've talked about this. This was this was part of my reason, and this might be the first time I've mentioned him since the draft, and it applied to Malachi Corley too. But a big part of my reasoning with the Brock Bowers wanting him and Corley, I'd said a few times, that would be my ideal draft. Brock Bowers round 1, Malachi Corley after that. Two of the most physical receivers in the draft, both who excel at catching quick hitters. And if you just watch Aaron Rodgers play over the past several years, look at the numbers that support it. I believe it's 65%, somewhere in that neighborhood, of his passes are completed within 5-10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Aaron Rodgers loves the quick hitters. And that's another part of the reason why this offensive line, and we talked about this when the Jets traded for him. And it's not to say I don't want the Jets to have an elite offensive line, but really with Aaron Rodgers, you just need a capable offensive line because give him 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, less than that really. His time is, I haven't looked at it in a while, but I'm sure when they're rolling, when Aaron Rodgers is driving down the field, running one play after another, the ball's just coming out in such a hurry, and you don't need an O-line that can block, and hold pass rushers off for 3-4 plus seconds on a consistent basis. Any news on Trent Williams? Trent Williams, last I heard, he's still holding out. Brandon Ayuk holding in. As I said on Twitter yesterday, to Trent Williams, same goes for Brandon Ayuk. You guys hold out for every penny you're worth. I think $50 million a year each minimum. If I were them, I wouldn't consider coming in for a penny less. And stand by your guns. You got families to feed. And if you want to be able to do that, you can't do that on $40 million a year. You need 50. 50 million is a good fair number. Ayuk, Williams, 50 each. Don't sign on the dotted line until the Niners make that happen. But the Niners, and we talked about this yesterday, they have a lot of guys between holdouts, injuries. Pearsall, McCaffrey have missed time with injuries. Williams again holding out. Ayuk holding in the building, working with the team, but not practicing. So we'll see what they work out before the opener. And they have to realize, San Francisco, listen, if they lose the opener, it's not the end of the world for anybody, for either team. That was a point that came up yesterday when I did the Jake Gassman show. And I said that my exact thought process as I was watching that final preseason game, and they flashed up the graphic of the Jets' first 4 or 5 games of the season. I think, I look at that and I just think, if the Jets lose to San Francisco, which I don't expect to happen, but it could happen. Anytime you're going east to west, you're making that trip, you're playing a very good football team with or without the injuries they have, and a very good coaching staff, you could lose that game. Jets could lose that game. I fully expect them to win 4 or 5 in a row after that game. So if the Jets lose, it'll suck after all the hype and all the let's get pumped up and the Jets are going to be so good. They go out and lose week 1. Yeah, it's not gonna put any of us in a really good mood. But at the same time, people don't need to freak out over it. I would have, to me, the ideal scenario would have been play San Francisco week 3 or 4. Like early on, fine. But I want them getting ramped up and prepped before they play the best team on their schedule. And it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds because actually, no, I would have to look at it. I was going to say I think San Francisco played their starters more than the Jets did, but I was thinking of Kansas City with Mahomes playing a bunch in their final preseason game or the previous week when he had the behind the back completion to Travis Kelce. Let's see. All right, Jets make the trade of Codrington official. So it looks like, okay, so it's Codrington and a 7 in exchange for a 6. So I've got to update that. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So yeah, the Jets have just tweeted out Brandon Codrington, 2026 7th in exchange for a 2026 6th. All right, so Codrington, wish him well when he's not playing the Jets. And another trade here. This is the Rams. Center linebacker Ernest Jones to the Titans. Few deals today. Siaki Ika, big DT in the middle of that Browns defense. They released him. Drafted him just a year ago in the third round. Big, powerful guy in the middle. Wasn't he? Didn't he spend time at Baylor? I think he was a Baylor guy. Off the top of my head. And let's see. Man, do I hate cryptic tweets. Who is this? Okay. Leonard Taylor. Jets DT just tweeted out a graphic of the Joker, old school cartoon Joker from Batman, laughing maniacally. So that is him, I take it, celebrating the news that he has made the roster. And still nothing from the New York Jets. That's what are we at? Yeah, is that what I said? Baylor, right, Dylan? Yeah, because Dylan and I have spoken recently about schools the color schemes are too similar that sometimes we get. But wasn't he at BYU too? He played at two schools. I'm sure he played at two schools. But that's another one for me. Baylor and Oregon. I do that a lot. I'll say this guy went to Baylor. Turns out it was Oregon. Braden says, why trade him to the Bills? So what I'd mentioned earlier, Braden, and this is just, I'm just guessing, but my guess is the Jets knew Codrington had some value because he's done some good things in the preseason, called around to teams, and had limited interest. Okay, so Dylan says the Jets just announced the 53. Has it been tweeted out? Did they tweet it, Dylan? Here it is. At long last. The New York Jets 53-man roster, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go through it. It's alphabetical, so it won't be by position. Running back Izzy Abanikanda makes the Jets roster. Tony Adams, no surprise there. Izzy, of course, was a bubble guy. Braylon Allen, no surprise there. Zaire Barnes makes it, so now I got to see if Surratt made it. I thought they both had a shot, but there's a draft pick from last year who sticks. Jarek Bernard Converse, love that he stuck. Jason Brownlee, I've said, look, people are torn on Brownlee. I've been saying for a while now I thought he was a lock to make this roster. Some folks disagreed. Michael Carter makes the roster. Irv Charles made it. I liked him to make it after Hardy. Last 24, 48 hours, I said maybe not if they're not putting as much emphasis on a gunner. Irv Charles makes it. Chuck Clark, no surprise. Michael Clemens, Jets carrying 37 defensive linemen. Michael Clemens makes the cut. Tyler Conklin makes the cut, no surprise. Malachi Corley, of course. Ashton Davis, no surprise there. Isaiah Davis, as we all expected. Let's see. Brandon Eccles, no surprise there. Olu, Sauce, Xavier Gibson makes it. Brees, Thomas Hennessy, whose brother I just mentioned. Jermaine Johnson. Every 6 or 7 players, there's an ad popping up. Javon Kinlaw makes it. Alan Lazard makes it. Will McDonald. Braden McGregor. Tack McKinley. Max Mitchell, congrats to him. We all had a lot of questions about him. Thomas Morstead. Max Mitchell, big bounce back for him. Let's see, if he gets called on to perform in real games, let's see how he does. Morgan Moses, CJ Mosley, Xavier Newman, Isaiah Oliver, DJ Reed, Aaron Rodgers, Jeremy Ruckert, again, Wes Schweitzer, Jamie and Sherwood, John Simpson, Tyron Smith, Qantas Stiggers, all expected. Chaz Surratt makes it, so both backers make it. So, and they both had really good camps, so good for them. Leonard Taylor, we've talked about. Tyrod Taylor, Solomon Thomas, Joe Tipman. That's who I left out earlier was Thomas when I was naming the D lineman. Elijah Vera Tucker, Carter Warren, Eric Watts, Mike Williams, another ad, Quincy Williams, Quinnen Williams, and Garrett Wilson. And Greg Zuerlein, of course. The Z-Man, alphabetically. Last guy out there. So there you have it, folks. There is, at least for now, the Jets' 53-man roster. And let's see. Oh, some news here. The Jets placed Leki Fotu and Kenny Yeboah on IR. Both could come back. Just mentioned it there. Braden Yeboah to IR with Leki Fotu. They'll miss at least 4 weeks. And Jordan Travis placed on the reserve non-football injury list. Let's see. Just checking for any initial news comes along with it, other than the guys I already mentioned. So, all right, yeah, there you have it, folks. Couple of minor surprises. Again, there were a lot of questions from people. Would he make it or not? He makes it. Kept a lot of D linemen. A lot of folks thought Brownlee wouldn't make it. He does. A lot of people were torn on Irv Charles. He makes it. So a lot of receivers. Gibson, Corley, Lazard, Williams, Wilson, Brownlee. That's a big group. But there you go. We've waited we've waited months, but couple hours there, it felt like. Yeah, Dylan says 2 tight ends. I would imagine, like, as I said, these guys, these 53s come out, and then as of, over the next 24, 48 hours, a couple of them bound to get cut, let go, and other teams or other players who are released by other teams will be taking those spots. So we'll see how I want to see if they've got wanted to see if I doubt they've put the depth chart out. I want to see it in a more, see the roster that they have out is pre-cuts. So some of the bigger, I don't know, to me, some of the stuff that was more unknown, and now we have our answers, is Izzy, is the linebackers, is Irv Charles at receiver, and the rookie undrafted guys would have been the biggest story, but that broke a couple of hours ago. So we've been talking about that for a little while already. Let's see. Hated the Brandon Smith cut, says Frank. I don't disagree with you, and I think he's a practice squad guy moving forward. Let's see. No Yeboah, we talked about that. 2 tight ends. 2 of those DL are headed for the practice squad. Who do you think, Braden? Who do you think's headed of the practice squad? Because I don't see any of these guys making it to the practice squad. Of the young guys. Of the young guys, I don't think. Martinez. I said the other day, I prefer Peasley to Martinez, but really they need to get someone better than both of those guys. I mentioned Zappy earlier. He was let go in New England. I mentioned in a tweet earlier, Sudfeld, who's been sort of a career backup. He's out there, and I would take either one of those 2 over the guys the Jets have right now. Just put them on the practice squad, and you bring them up if somebody gets dinged up, somebody gets hurt. Not the emergency quarterback elevation thing. Dylan and I talked about that earlier. We talked about it on here. So let's see. Guys who were cut. We know who the roster is, but if we go through the cuts, there might be a name or 2 that we forget that or guys who we think might be coming back. Shamar Bartholomew, I think he's a candidate to come back because he can play the slot. Again, Michael Carter, I think they will try to retain him. But as we said, they got to find ways to find cap space over the next couple of years. So maybe Carter coming back isn't the lock we think it is. I think Carter will be back, but nothing wrong with young depth at a position like that. Al Blades, we talked about him. Austin Deculus, the offensive tackle. Sam Egwavon, I think he comes back as a practice squad guy. Obina Ezi, he's got the practice squad exemption as the international pathway, so expect to see him come back. Anthony Ferkser, gone. when they picked him up, I thought he had a good shot, but the more I watched him, the less I thought he would stick. Chris Glazer thought he had a shot. Again, they've worked him in at center this year, so he's played both center and guard. Aaron Rodgers really raved about him the other day when he was asked about, you could throw out a few names of guys who have performed well. Jake Hansen, another one. I wouldn't be surprised if both those guys are back. Tyler Harrell, really hope to see more from him this preseason. A guy, advertised as a guy who runs in the 4.2s, just didn't really get to see that. Bruce Hector he made some splash plays, but he's one of those guys, he was making plays, but still never got the vibe that he was going to hang around. Anthony Hines, Jalen Holmes, tough cut, at least, as I said, for me. I thought his versatility and I thought the fact he played so well would give him a shot. Deion Jackson, late addition at running back. He was clearly a camp body. Jalen Key, Mr. Irrelevant. We talked about Zach Kuntz. I think that project might be over. Jarius Monroe, I would put on the practice squad. Brady Latham, I would put on the practice squad. Cole Laval, well, I think here's my problem. I'm putting like 5 interior linemen on the practice squad. I like the interior linemen. Adrian Martinez, gone. Marcelino McCrary Ball, gone. Lance McCutcheon never really showed much. Andrew Peasley, gone. Lincoln Sefcik, a guy that we've talked about on our show a few times. I thought he had a chance to stick. Maybe he's a guy they bring back for the practice squad. Austin Siebert, I'm a little surprised. I thought they'd get a pick for him. I thought they would deal him to somebody for a 7. Didn't happen. Kendall Sheffield, slightly surprised because, as I said, when they added him, he's a guy who was familiar with Ulbrich, veteran guy, plays the slot, where they could use some depth, and they hardly played him in the preseason. So I figured he was a guy that they were wrapping up and keeping on the shelf till the season started. Nehemiah Shelton, he's come and gone many times over. Jackson Sermon led the team in missed tackles, according to PFF. That's never good. Made a couple of plays, but that wasn't good enough. Tanzel Smart, the perpetual practice squad guy. Does he come back? We will see. Brandon Smith, I think he comes back. Trey Swilling, wouldn't mind seeing him back. I thought he looked good. Jalen Twyman, Willie Tyler, the offensive tackle, college tackle, who the Jets were working at guard out of Louisville, gone. Xavier Valade, who we talked about, and Isaiah Winstead, the UFL, the UFL receiver, who really didn't show a whole lot in the preseason in the opportunities that he was given. So there you have it, folks. The Jets 53-man roster. Fotu to IR. Little bit. That's should probably touch on that a little bit more. I think they got to get a run plugger in there. I mean, that can be, you're going to have Kinlaw, you're going to have Quinnen. I think it's still like a big body in there. That's something maybe keep an eye on what the Jets are looking at as they scour the waiver wire. So again, Yeboah and Fotu go to IR at least 4 weeks. Yeboah not as big of a deal as Fotu. And let's see. Fotu. Yep. All right. So I think that wraps it up. Anyone, let's I'm going to jump back in here because I've been reading the roster. If you got any more questions? Bailey Zappi, WTF are you talking about? Talking about a guy who's played some good football in the NFL versus a couple of guys who look like they don't belong in the NFL. He's just an upgrade over what they have. That's all. Not putting the guy in Canton just yet. I thought Bartholomew was pretty good. Same, agreed. I thought Bartholomew, I think he's a practice squad candidate. Have to take every foreign exchange player at 17. Have to take I'm not sure what you mean. He doesn't count against the 17 as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know. It's just a practice squad sort of exemption where you can carry that guy because they want the international pathway thing. Short term, Peter, are Fotu and Yeboah on short term IR. Short term, miss at least 4 weeks. So I would expect both of them back at some point. And I think that'll wrap it up. There you have the roster. No bombshells. Well, again, the biggest bombshell dropped hours before the roster came out. Love to see the UDFAs make it. Love to see the preseason they had. Those guys, obviously put in a ton of work because you don't show up as a UDFA and get the kind of results they got without putting in work. And look, I get that it's against backups. I completely understand that. But my thing is always, when you're talking about these guys, and here's the funny part is we'll watch these guys in college against college players more times than not, playing against guys who aren't good enough to get on an NFL field at any point in their lives. So then when they get to the NFL, it's like, oh, that's sick. And we'll watch them against those guys. We'll watch them beat up other college guys who will never sniff the NFL. And we'll be like, oh, this guy's great. Look how awesome he is. You got to draft him. Look, he had this many sacks and this many picks and this many touchdowns. And look at this highlight. Look at this film. And he's doing it mostly against guys who will never sniff an NFL roster. Then they get to the NFL and they perform against guys who were good enough in college to be on an NFL field, be it on a 90 or 53-man roster, don't care. And they perform well, and it's, oh, who cares? Who cares? It's against second and third stringers. You wanted this dude drafted based on what he did against guys who were in high school the year before and who will never see an NFL team. So it's a little bit like I don't get. It's super impressive when you do it against a guy who was in high school a year ago, but when you do it against a guy who's on an NFL football team, again, don't care if it's a 90-man or whatever roster. That's not, basically my point is you're watching guys play against the highest level of competition they've ever played against, and they're performing. And when they did it at a lower level, you got excited, and when they do it against a higher level, who cares? I don't care. So it's against second and third stringers, but you know what? That's your first test. And if you pass with flying colors, you get to be on the roster, and we'll have you try it against first stringers at some point. And if you can't do it against them, then you leave, and we find someone else who can. That's it for me. That's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow night, myself, Dylan Terman, Chris Schubert will go even deeper on the roster. The three of us will share our thoughts and may have some news in terms of guys who are no longer on the roster by tomorrow night. That'll wrap this one up. Have a good one, Jets fans. And football season that much closer.